Why me?
I was standing in a hospital corridor at 2:47 in the morning, staring through a window at my wife of 23 years, watching machines breathe for her, watching her chest rise and fall artificially, watching the numbers on monitors spike and dip like some cruel roller coaster I never bought a ticket for. The doctor had just told me she had maybe hours left, maybe less. But that wasn't the part that destroyed me. What destroyed me was what the nurse whispered as she walked past, checking Catherine's IV line one more time before the shift change. She leaned in close, her voice barely audible over the beeping machines, and she said four words that would unravel everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, and the woman I'd shared a bed with for over 2 decades. She said, "Which wife are you?" My name is Robert Mitchell. I'm 58 years old. I live in Columbus, Ohio, in a 4-bedroom house with a 2-car garage and a golden retriever named Duke. I built a successful insurance business from nothing. I coached Little League for 6 years. I've never missed a mortgage payment. I'm not a detective. I'm not a private investigator. I'm just a regular guy who thought he had a regular life with a regular marriage to a woman he loved. But on October 14th, 2019, I learned something that every person watching this needs to understand. You don't know anyone, not really, not completely, because the person you wake up next to every morning, the person you share your coffee with, the person who knows how you like your eggs and which side of the bed you prefer, when that person can be carrying secrets so massive, so carefully hidden, that even after decades together, you're essentially living with a stranger. And I'm not talking about small secrets. I'm not talking about a hidden credit card or a secret shopping habit or even an affair. I'm talking about a completely different identity, a completely different life, a family you never knew existed, a past so dark and so buried that when it finally surfaces, it doesn't just crack your world, it shatters it into pieces so small you'll never put them back together the same way again. Let me take you back to the beginning, to before I was standing in that hospital corridor, to before the nurse's four words ripped my reality apart. Let me take you back to October 13th, 2019. It was a Monday, unremarkable. I had a business trip scheduled to Chicago, big client meeting, 3 days planned. Catherine made me breakfast that morning, just like she always did. Scrambled eggs, toast, coffee, exactly how I like it. We sat at the kitchen table like we had thousands of times before. We talked about normal things, the weather, Duke needing a vet appointment, our daughter Emma's new job, our son David's upcoming birthday. Nothing felt wrong. Nothing felt off. Catherine kissed me goodbye at the door. She said, "Love you. Be safe. Call me when you land." I said, "Love you too. I'll be back Thursday night." I grabbed my suitcase. I got in my car. I drove to the airport, and I had absolutely no idea that would be the last normal moment of my entire life. Because when I landed in Chicago 3 hours later, when I checked into my hotel and sent Catherine a text message saying I'd arrived safely, I had no idea she was already gone. Catherine always responded to my texts. Always. It was one of those little marriage habits you develop over decades together. So when my text on Monday evening went unanswered, I noticed, but I didn't panic. I figured she was busy. Maybe her phone died. I sent another text an hour later. Nothing. I called, straight to voicemail. By 10 o'clock that night, I was starting to feel that creeping anxiety, that little voice in your head that says something's not right. I called our landline. No answer. I called our daughter Emma. She hadn't heard from her mom since Sunday. I called our son David. Same thing. By midnight, I was pacing my hotel room, calling Catherine's phone over and over, and each time going straight to voicemail. Tuesday morning, I called her work, the library where she'd worked as a librarian for the past 15 years. Her supervisor said Catherine had called in sick Monday morning, said she wasn't feeling well and would probably be out for a few days. But Catherine hadn't mentioned being sick to me. I called our neighbors. No one had seen her. I called her book club friends. She hadn't shown up to their meeting Monday night, which was unusual because Catherine never missed book club. By Tuesday afternoon, I couldn't focus on anything. I called the Columbus police. They told me an adult missing for less than 48 hours isn't usually considered high priority unless there are signs of foul play. They said maybe she just needed space. But I knew Catherine. Something was wrong. So I canceled my Wednesday morning meeting. I canceled the entire trip. I packed my bag, checked out of my hotel, and at 9 o'clock Tuesday night, I started the 4.5-hour drive back to Columbus. I pulled into our driveway at 2:17 in the morning. The house was completely dark. Every light off. Catherine's car was gone. I sat there for a moment, staring at our house, this place we'd lived for 18 years, and it looked wrong somehow. Empty, hollow. I got out of the car and walked to the front door. The second I opened that door, I heard Duke whimpering. Our golden retriever was standing in the hallway, tail between his legs, whining in that way dogs do when they're anxious or scared. I turned on the lights. The house was exactly as I'd left it Monday morning. Breakfast dishes still in the sink. Her coffee mug still on the counter, half full, cold. Her reading glasses on the side table. Everything normal, everything in place, except Catherine wasn't there. I walked through every room. The bed was made. Her phone charger was plugged in on her nightstand, but no phone. Her purse was gone. Her car keys were gone. But her wallet was sitting on the dresser, which was strange because why would she take her purse but leave her wallet? I checked the closet. Most of her clothes were still there. Her toothbrush was still in the holder. This wasn't someone who'd packed up and left. This was someone who'd walked out intending to come back. So where was she? I fed Duke. He was hungry, his water bowl nearly empty, which meant no one had been home to care for him for at least a day. I sat on the couch, phone in hand, trying to decide what to do next. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. At 2:47 in the morning, my phone rang. Unknown number. Columbus area code. My heart jumped into my throat. I answered on the first ring. A woman's voice. Professional. Calm. She said, "Is this Robert Mitchell?" I said yes. She said, "Mr. Mitchell, this is Ohio State Medical Center, intensive care unit. Your wife was brought in by ambulance approximately 6 hours ago. She's in critical condition. You need to come immediately." Critical condition. I asked what happened. She wouldn't say details over the phone. I asked if Catherine was going to be okay. She said, "Sir, you need to come now." I grabbed my keys. I ran to my car and drove. The hospital was 15 minutes away. I made it in 9. I parked illegally. I ran through the emergency room entrance, found the elevator, hit the button for the ICU floor. My hands were shaking. The elevator felt too slow. And when those doors finally opened on the 4th floor, I saw a doctor standing there waiting. Her name was Dr. Patricia Reynolds. She was in her 50s, gray hair pulled back, tired eyes. She asked me to follow her. We walked down a corridor past rooms with closed doors and dim lights. Dr. Reynolds stopped outside room 407. She turned to face me, and she said, "Mr. Mitchell, your wife is stable for now, but the next 24 hours are critical. She suffered massive internal injuries, multiple broken ribs, shattered pelvis, ruptured spleen, severe head trauma. We've had to induce a medical coma." I asked what happened. Was it a car accident? Dr. Reynolds looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. She said, "Mr. Mitchell, your wife didn't have an accident. According to the paramedics who brought her in, your wife jumped from the 4th floor level of a downtown parking garage at approximately 8:30 yesterday evening. This was a suicide attempt." Suicide attempt. Those two words didn't make sense. Catherine? My Catherine? The woman who volunteered at the food bank every Tuesday? Who baked pies for church fundraisers? Who sang in the choir? That Catherine tried to kill herself? I told Dr. Reynolds there must be some mistake, but she said, "The woman in this room was identified by her driver's license, Catherine Ann Mitchell. So date of birth March 7th, 1963. Is that your wife?" It was. Dr. Reynolds asked if I wanted to see her. I followed her into room 407. What I saw lying in that hospital bed was Catherine, but it also wasn't. Her face was swollen, bruised, almost unrecognizable. There was a breathing tube down her throat. IV lines in both arms. Monitors everywhere. She was unconscious, completely still, except for the mechanical rise and fall of her chest. I stood there trying to process what I was seeing. The nurse came in to check Catherine's vitals. adjusting the IV line, checking the monitors. And that's when I saw it. Catherine's hospital gown had shifted slightly, exposing her left shoulder blade. And there on her skin was something I had never seen before in 23 years of marriage. A tattoo. Small, maybe 2 inches wide. Black ink, numbers. 08151996. August 15th, 1996. I'd seen Catherine's body thousands of times. I knew every freckle, every scar, and I had never, not once, seen this tattoo. Catherine had always said she didn't like tattoos, didn't want to mark her skin permanently. So where did this come from? What did those numbers mean? August 15th, 1996. A date 3 years before we even met. Dr. Reynolds told me I could stay as long as I wanted, but there was nothing to do except wait. I sat in a chair next to her bed. I held her hand, careful not to disturb the IV line. Her hand was cold, limp, lifeless. A nurse came in around 4 in the morning. She said she had Catherine's personal belongings, the items she'd had with her when the paramedics brought her in. She handed me a clear plastic bag. Inside was Catherine's purse. I opened it. The contents were normal at first. Her phone, cracked screen, wouldn't turn on. A pack of tissues, chapstick, loose change. And then I found her wallet. I opened it. Inside was her driver's license. Catherine Ann Mitchell, our address in Columbus. Everything correct. But underneath her driver's license was another ID card. I pulled it out. It was a Colorado driver's license. Same photo of Catherine, but a different name. Karen Elizabeth Westbrook. Date of birth, March 7th, 1963. Same birthday as Catherine. Address in Denver, Colorado. I stared at this ID card, this driver's license with my wife's face and a completely different name, and my brain couldn't process it. Who was Karen Westbrook? Why did Catherine have this? Behind the Karen Westbrook ID was a bank card. Wells Fargo. Name on the card, Karen E. Westbrook. I'd never seen this card before. Catherine and I shared bank accounts. I knew every credit card we had, every debit card. This card, I'd never seen it. At the bottom of the purse, folded into a small square, was a photograph. I unfolded it. It was old, from the 90s, slightly faded. It showed Catherine, younger, maybe early 30s, standing next to a man I'd never seen before. He was tall, dark hair, his arm around her shoulder, and in front of them was a little boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, smiling at the camera. On the back of the photo, written in handwriting I didn't recognize, was a date, July 1994, 5 years before Catherine and I met. Who was this man? Who was this child? Catherine had told me she'd never been married before me. She'd told me she didn't have any children before our kids. She'd told me her family was all deceased. But this photo showed Catherine with a family I'd never known existed. There was one more item in the purse, an envelope, white, unsealed. Inside was a handwritten note. The handwriting was Catherine's. The note was short, just a few sentences. It said, "I can't run anymore. I can't hide anymore. I'm sorry for everything. I'm sorry for the lies. I'm sorry for the pain I caused. Please forgive me. Tell Michael I'm sorry. Tell Thomas I'm sorry. Tell Robert I'm sorry. I tried to be Catherine, but Karen never left, and Karen deserves to be punished for what she did." It was signed with a single letter, K. Tell Michael I'm sorry. Tell Thomas I'm sorry. Who were Michael and Thomas? I'd never heard Catherine mention those names, not once in 23 years. And what did she mean she tried to be Catherine, but Karen never left? Was Catherine not even her real name? I sat there holding this note, holding this photograph, holding this ID, and I realized I didn't know the woman lying in that bed. 23 years of marriage, and she was a complete stranger. I stepped out of the room. I called the Columbus Police Department non-emergency line. I explained the situation. I said my wife had attempted suicide, and I'd found evidence suggesting she'd been living under a false identity. The operator transferred me to a detective. His name was Michael Harris. I explained everything. The suicide attempt, the Colorado driver's license, the photograph, the note mentioning people I'd never heard of. Detective Harris listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "Mr. Mitchell, This sounds like your wife may have been living under an assumed identity. We're going to need to investigate this fully. Are you prepared for what we might find? Detective Michael Harris arrived at the hospital just after 6 in the morning. He was in his 50s, looked like he'd been a cop his entire adult life. He met me in the waiting area, introduced himself, sat down across from me. He asked me to start from the beginning and tell him everything. So I did. I told him about the trip to Chicago, about Catherine not responding, about coming home and finding her gone, about the hospital calling me, about what Dr. Reynolds told me. Then I showed him the contents of Catherine's purse, the Karen Westbrook driver's license, the Wells Fargo bank card, and the photograph, the note. Detective Harris examined each item carefully, taking photos with his phone, making notes. When he read the note, his expression changed. He asked if I knew anyone named Michael or Thomas. I said no. He asked about Catherine's background, her family, her history before we met. I told him what I knew. Catherine said she was from Portland, Oregon, said her parents died in a car accident in 1995, said she was an only child, said she moved to Ohio in 1998 for a fresh start. We met in 1999 at a community fundraiser, started dating, got married in 2001, had our daughter Emma in 2002, our son David in 2004. Normal life, normal marriage, nothing unusual. Or at least I thought it was normal. Detective Harris asked if he could take Catherine's belongings for evidence. I said yes. He said he was going to run the name Karen Elizabeth Westbrook through the system. He said he'd be in touch. I went back to Catherine's room. I called our daughter Emma in Cleveland and our son David in Cincinnati. I told them there'd been an accident. Their mother was in the hospital, critical condition, they needed to come. I didn't tell them about the suicide attempt or Karen Westbrook over the phone. Detective Harris called me around 10 that morning. He said he'd run Karen Elizabeth Westbrook through the national database. He said what he found was significant and I needed to come to the police station. Emma arrived just before 11. She ran into Catherine's room, saw her mother in that hospital bed, and broke down crying. David arrived around noon 30. Same reaction. We sat in Catherine's room for an hour, the three of us, watching this woman we all thought we knew fighting for her life. Then I told them I needed to step out, needed to talk to the police. I left them there and drove to the Columbus Police Department. Detective Harris was waiting. He led me to an interview room and sat down across from me. He said, "Mr. Mitchell, your wife's real name is Karen Elizabeth Westbrook. She was born March 7th, 1963 in Denver, Colorado. She married a man named Thomas Westbrook in June of 1985. They had one son, Michael Westbrook, born April 19th, 1988. And on August 15th, 1996, Karen Westbrook disappeared, vanished without a trace. Her husband reported her missing, and there was a massive search, police investigation, media coverage. Nothing was ever found. The case went cold. Thomas Westbrook and his son Michael were left with no answers, no closure, nothing. And for the past 23 years, Karen Westbrook has been listed as a missing person. Until now. Detective Harris slid a photograph across the table. It was an old missing person poster. Missing Karen Elizabeth Westbrook, last seen August 15th, 1996. The photo on that poster was Catherine. Younger, different hairstyle, but unmistakably her. I asked what happened. Why did she disappear? He said according to the case file, there were allegations of domestic issues in the marriage. Karen had gone to the hospital twice in the 2 years before she disappeared. Once for a broken arm, once for bruised ribs. The injuries were consistent with domestic violence. They'd questioned Thomas Westbrook. He denied everything. Karen never pressed charges. And then she vanished. Police suspected Thomas might have been involved, but they never found any evidence. Detective Harris told me Thomas Westbrook still lived in Denver. He was 62 years old now, retired contractor, never remarried, raised his son Michael alone. And Michael, the son Catherine abandoned, was now 31 years old. Married, had 2 kids of his own, worked as an engineer. And according to Detective Harris, Michael Westbrook had never stopped looking for his mother. He'd hired private investigators over the years. He joined missing persons forums online. He'd submitted DNA to databases hoping for a match. He'd spent hundreds of hours and thousands of dollars trying to find out what happened to Karen Westbrook. And now we know what happened. She didn't die. She ran. She created a new identity, became Catherine Foster, later Catherine Mitchell, and built a completely new life in Ohio, while her husband and 8-year-old son were left behind, wondering if she was dead. Detective Harris said legally, this was complicated. Catherine hadn't committed any major crimes that they knew of yet. But the bigger question was, did Thomas or Michael Westbrook deserve to know that the woman who'd been missing for 23 years was currently in a hospital in Columbus, fighting for her life? Detective Harris said he was obligated to contact the Westbrook family. He said he'd make the call that afternoon. He said I should prepare myself. Because once Thomas and Michael knew Karen was alive, things were going to get very complicated. I drove back to the hospital in a daze. Everything I thought I knew about my life had been dismantled in less than 12 hours. Emma and David were still in Catherine's room when I got back. I sat them down and told them everything. The fake ID, the real name, the husband and son in Colorado, the missing person case. Emma didn't believe it at first. She said there must be some mistake. But David stared at the missing person poster I showed him and said, "What else don't we know about her?" Detective Harris called me that evening. He said he'd contacted Thomas Westbrook in Denver, told him Karen had been found, told him she was in a hospital in Columbus, told him about the suicide attempt. Thomas was silent for a long time, and then asked if Karen was going to survive. Detective Harris said the doctors didn't know. Then Thomas said something Detective Harris felt I should know. Thomas said, "Tell her I forgive her. After all these years, I finally understand why she left. I was angry. I was controlling. I put my hands on her. I'm not proud of it, but I can't change it. She was right to run. I just wish she'd taken Michael with her." Detective Harris also spoke to Michael Westbrook. Michael's reaction was different. He was angry. He said his mother abandoned him when he was 8 years old, left him with an abusive father, never tried to contact him. He'd spent 23 years wondering if she was dead, if she'd been murdered. And now he finds out she was alive the whole time, in living a comfortable life in Ohio with a new husband and new kids while he grew up traumatized and alone. Michael told Detective Harris he wanted to see her, wanted to confront her, wanted answers. Detective Harris said he couldn't stop him. Michael was Karen's biological son. He had a right to see his mother. So Detective Harris told me that Michael Westbrook was flying to Columbus the next day, and he'd be coming to the hospital. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed in Catherine's room, watching her chest rise and fall with the ventilator, watching the monitors, waiting for some sign that she was going to wake up, that I'd have a chance to ask her why. But she didn't wake up. The doctors said her brain activity was stable, which was good, but she was still in critical condition. The next morning, October 16th, 2 days after Catherine's suicide attempt, Detective Harris called. He said Michael Westbrook had landed in Columbus. He was at the police station. He wanted to come to the hospital. Detective Harris asked if I was okay with that. I said I didn't know if I had the right to say no. This was Michael's mother. Detective Harris said he'd bring Michael to the hospital within the hour. He warned me that Michael was angry, emotional, unpredictable. Michael Westbrook arrived at the hospital just before noon. Detective Harris brought him up to the ICU floor. I met them outside Catherine's room. Michael was tall, dark hair like the man in the photograph, who must have been his father Thomas. He looked exhausted. His eyes were red. When he saw me, he didn't say anything at first, just stared. And then he said, "You're Robert Mitchell?" I nodded. And he said, "Oh, you're the man my mother chose to replace us." I said, "I didn't know. I swear to you, I had no idea about any of this until 2 days ago." Michael nodded slowly. Then he asked, "Can I see her?" I stepped aside. He walked into the room. I stayed in the doorway, watching. Michael approached the bed slowly, staring at the woman lying there. He stood next to the bed for a long time, just looking at her. And then he said quietly, "I'm 31 years old. I have a wife. I have 2 daughters. And I have spent my entire adult life in therapy trying to understand why my mother left me, trying to figure out what I did wrong. What was so terrible about me that she'd rather disappear than stay." He reached out and touched Catherine's hand, and he said, "I want to hate you. I've hated you for 23 years, but looking at you now, seeing you like this, all I feel is sad." Michael stayed for about 30 minutes. When he finally left the room, he asked if we could talk somewhere private. We went to the hospital cafeteria, sat at a corner table with terrible coffee neither of us drank. Michael told me his story. He said his childhood was difficult. His father, Thomas, was angry all the time, yelled a lot, threw things. Michael remembered his parents fighting constantly, remembered his mother crying, remembered being scared, but he also remembered loving his mother. And then one day, August 15th, 1996, he came home from day camp, and his mother was gone. His father said she'd left, said she didn't want to be a mother anymore. Michael was 8 years old. He blamed himself. Spent his entire childhood and teenage years wondering where she was, if she was alive, if she ever thought about him. His father never talked about her, removed all her photos from the house. Michael said he grew up angry, depressed, struggling to form relationships because he couldn't trust anyone. Michael said when he turned 18, he moved out of his father's house, went to college, tried to build a life, but he never stopped wondering about his mother. And then a few years ago, when he was helping his father move to a smaller house, he found something in a box in the attic. A letter. His mother had written it the day she left. It was addressed to Michael, but his father had hidden it, never gave it to him. Michael pulled a folded piece of paper from his wallet. He said he'd been carrying it every day since he found it. He handed it to me. The paper was old, yellowed, and it was Catherine's handwriting. The letter said, "My dearest Michael, I am writing this knowing I may never see you again, and that thought breaks my heart in ways I can't describe. You are the best thing I ever did in my life. I am leaving because if I stay, your father will kill me. I don't say that to be dramatic. I say it because it is true. He has hurt me so many times and each time it gets worse. I am so sorry, my sweet boy. I am sorry I am not strong enough to take you with me. But if I take you, your father will hunt us down. He will find us, and he will hurt both of us. So I am leaving alone, hoping that without me there, your father will calm down. We'll be better. We'll focus on being a good dad to you. Please forgive me. Please know that I love you more than anything in this world. And please know that leaving you is the hardest thing I have ever done. I will think about you every single day. I love you forever. Mom." I read that letter 3 times. This wasn't a woman who casually abandoned her family. This was a woman who was desperate, terrified, trapped. I looked at Michael and said, "Did your father hurt you after she left?" Michael was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. He said not as bad as he hurt her, but yes. He was angry all the time. Michael learned to stay out of his way. He survived but didn't really live until he got out of that house. We went back up to the ICU. Michael said he wanted to stay for a while longer. Emma and David had come back to the hospital. I introduced them to Michael, your half-brother, the son your mother had before you. It was surreal. And then, around 4 in the afternoon on October 18th, 4 days after Catherine jumped from that parking garage, something changed. The monitors started beeping differently. The nurse came in quickly, called for Dr. Reynolds. Dr. Reynolds examined Catherine and said, "She's waking up. Her brain activity is increasing. She's showing signs of consciousness." We all stood there frozen. Catherine's eyelids fluttered. Her fingers twitched. Her eyes slowly opened, unfocused at first, then slowly clearing. She looked around the room. Her eyes landed on me first, then on Emma and David, and then on Michael. And when she saw Michael, when she saw her son standing there, her eyes filled with tears. She tried to move, but the restraints and injuries prevented it. She tried to speak, but the breathing tube made it impossible. Dr. Reynolds said they'd need to run tests before removing the breathing tube, but this was a very good sign. Catherine was going to survive. It took another 6 hours before they removed the breathing tube. Catherine's vitals were stable. They removed it carefully. Catherine coughed, gasped. The nurse gave her ice chips, small sips of water. And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, Catherine said her first words. She looked at me and said, "You weren't supposed to come back. You weren't supposed to know." Catherine looked at Michael. Fresh tears spilled down her face. She said, "Michael, oh my God, Michael, you're so big. You're a man. I missed everything. I missed your entire life." Michael stood at the foot of the bed, arms crossed. He said, "Why did you leave me?" Catherine closed her eyes. More tears. She said, "I thought I was saving your life. I thought if I left, your father would calm down, would focus on being a good dad. I thought you'd be better off without me." Michael's voice cracked. He said, "I wasn't better off. I needed my mom. I needed you." Catherine sobbed. She said, I know, I'm so sorry." Over the next few hours, as Catherine regained more strength, she told us everything. She confirmed what we'd already learned. Her real name was Karen Elizabeth Westbrook. She'd married Thomas Westbrook when she was 22, had Michael when she was 25, and the marriage was a nightmare from the start. Thomas was controlling, jealous, possessive. It escalated to verbal abuse, then physical. By the time Michael was 7, Karen said she was being hit regularly, choked, threatened. She'd gone to the police twice. Both times, Thomas convinced them it was a misunderstanding. She tried to leave once when Michael was 6, took him and drove to her sister's house 3 states away. Thomas found them within a week. He dragged her back. He told her if she ever tried to leave again, he'd kill her and make sure no one ever found her body. And she believed him. So she stayed for 2 more years, enduring the abuse, protecting Michael as best as she could, planning. She saved money secretly. She researched how to disappear. And on August 15th, 1996, when Thomas was at work and Michael was at day camp, she left. She took some clothes, $3,000 in cash, and her car. She drove west, changed her appearance. And in 1998, she bought a new identity from a woman she met at a homeless shelter. Catherine Ann Foster, a real person who died of an overdose in 1997. Karen became Catherine, moved to Ohio, got a job at a library, met me in 1999, and built a new life. Catherine said the hardest part wasn't the running or the hiding or creating a fake identity. The hardest part was living with the guilt of leaving Michael. She said every birthday, every Christmas, every milestone she celebrated with Emma and David, she thought about her son, wondered where he was, what he looked like, if he hated her. She said she almost contacted him a dozen times over the years, but was terrified Thomas would find out, would find her, would kill her, or hurt Michael, or hurt me and our kids. So she stayed silent, stayed hidden, and the guilt ate at her from the inside. Catherine said the week before her suicide attempt, she'd been having nightmares, vivid, terrible nightmares about Michael. In the dreams, he was still 8 years old, crying, asking why she left him. She'd wake up sobbing. She stopped sleeping, stopped eating. The depression came roaring back, and she started thinking that maybe everyone would be better off if she was gone. Me, Emma, David, we'd been lied to. We deserved better. Michael deserved a mother who hadn't abandoned him. So on October 14th, she drove to a downtown parking garage. She went to the 4th floor, and she jumped. When Catherine finished talking, the room was silent. Emma and David were crying. I was staring at the floor, and Michael was standing at the window, looking out at the Columbus skyline. Finally, he turned around. He looked at Catherine and said, "I spent 23 years hating you, blaming you, thinking you abandoned me because I wasn't good enough, and now I find out you left to save your own life." Catherine nodded, unable to speak. Michael continued, "I'm not going to stand here and say I forgive you. I'm not there yet. Maybe I'll never be there. But I understand now. I understand why you did what you did. And I understand that you were a victim too. My father hurt you. He hurt me. He destroyed our family. And you did what you thought you had to do to survive." He paused, then said, "I have a family now, a wife, 2 daughters. And if I was in a situation where staying meant dying, I don't know what I'd do." Catherine reached out her hand. Michael hesitated, then walked over and took it. She said, "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but if you're willing, I'd like to try. I'd like to know you. I'd like to meet my grandchildren." Michael nodded slowly. He said, "We'll see. One step at a time." Later that night, after Michael had left, after Emma and David had gone back to the house, I sat alone with Catherine. She looked at me with exhausted eyes and said, "Are you going to leave me?" I'd been asking myself that question for 4 days. I said, You lied to me for 23 years. About your name, about your past, about who you are. How am I supposed to trust you again? Catherine nodded. She said, You're not. You can't. I understand that. And I don't expect you to stay. You have every right to walk away, to divorce me, because I built our entire marriage on a lie. I said, Why didn't you tell me? At some point in 23 years, why didn't you trust me enough to tell me the truth? She said, Because I was terrified. One, or terrified that if you knew, you'd think less of me. Terrified that you'd leave. Terrified that word would somehow get back to Thomas and he'd find me. I know that sounds paranoid, but when you've lived in fear for as long as I have, paranoia becomes survival. I sat there thinking about everything I'd learned, and I realized they were the same person. Catherine was Karen. Karen was Catherine. She'd lived two lives, but the core of who she was, the kind, caring, loving woman I'd known for over 2 decades, that was real. The life she'd built with me, that was real. The love she had for our kids, that was real. The lies were about her past, not her present, not her feelings. I told Catherine I needed time. Time to process. Time to figure out if I could move past this. I said I wasn't making any promises, but I wasn't walking away either. Not yet. She said she understood. Over the next few weeks, Catherine recovered physically. The broken bones healed. The internal injuries stabilized. She was transferred out of the ICU, then to a regular hospital room, then to a rehabilitation facility. Michael visited twice more. Brief visits, awkward conversations, but progress. He brought photos of his daughters. Catherine cried looking at them. Emma and David struggled with the revelations. Emma was angry at first, felt betrayed, but eventually she came around. Said her mother was still her mother, regardless of her name or her past. David was more pragmatic. Said everyone has secrets. Some are just bigger than others. I filed for separation, not divorce, just separation. I told Catherine I needed space to figure things out. She moved into a small apartment when she was released from rehab. We talked occasionally, stiff, formal conversations at first, but slowly, over months, we started talking about other things. About our marriage, about the good times, about whether there was a path forward. 6 months after Catherine's suicide attempt, Detective Harris called me with news. Thomas Westbrook had died. Heart attack. He was 62. Michael called Catherine to tell her. She didn't cry, didn't react much at all, just relief that he couldn't hurt anyone anymore. But then Michael told her something else. After Thomas died, Michael had been going through his father's belongings, and he found journals, dozens of journals Thomas had kept over the years. And in those journals, Thomas had written about Karen, about the abuse, about his regret. And in the later journals from the mid-2000s onward, Thomas had written about getting therapy, about realizing he'd been an abusive husband and neglectful father, about understanding why Karen left. He'd written about hoping she was alive somewhere, safe, happy. Michael read some of these entries to Catherine over the phone, and Catherine, for the first time, cried for Thomas. Not for the man he was when she knew him, but for the man he apparently became after she left. A year after the suicide attempt, Catherine and I went to therapy together, a counselor who specialized in trauma and trust issues. We spent months unpacking everything, my feelings of betrayal, her feelings of guilt and shame, the complexity of loving someone who'd lied about fundamental things, and slowly, painfully, we started to rebuild. And I realized that Catherine had been a victim long before she was a liar, that the choices she made were survival choices, not selfish choices. And while I couldn't excuse the lies, I could understand them. We decided to try again, not to go back to the way things were. That was impossible, but to build something new, something based on honesty. I asked her to tell me everything about Karen's life, about her childhood, her marriage to Thomas, her years on the run, the moment she decided to become Catherine. And she did. Hours and hours of conversations, some that left us both in tears, but conversations that finally let me know who my wife really was. We remarried, small ceremony, just us, Emma, David, and Michael. Catherine officially changed her name legally to Catherine Mitchell. Michael and Catherine built a relationship slowly. And he introduced her to his wife, Lauren, and their two daughters, Catherine's granddaughters. Catherine flew to Denver a few times a year to visit. Michael and his family came to Columbus occasionally. It wasn't a typical mother-son relationship. There was still awkwardness, still pain, but there was also healing. Michael started therapy to deal with the abandonment trauma. He said meeting Catherine, hearing her story, understanding the context, had helped him make sense of things he'd struggled with his whole life. For Catherine's 60th birthday, Michael gave her a gift that made her sob. It was a photo album. The first half was filled with pictures from his childhood. School photos, sports teams, birthday parties, his wedding, the birth of his daughters, all the moments Catherine had missed. And the second half of the album was blank pages. And Michael had written on the first blank page, "For the memories we'll make together from now on." Today, 3 years after that October night when I stood in a hospital corridor and learned my wife wasn't who I thought she was, Catherine and I are still together. Our marriage is different now, stronger in some ways, more fragile in others. We don't take trust for granted. We communicate more honestly. Catherine still struggles with guilt, still has nightmares sometimes, still goes to therapy weekly, but she's also more present now, more authentic. She doesn't have to hide anymore. Emma and David have accepted their mother's past. They call Michael their brother. The families get together for holidays sometimes. It's unconventional, complicated, but it works. One Catherine volunteers now at a domestic violence shelter. She talks to women who are in situations similar to what she experienced. She tells them her story. She tells them they deserve to survive, that choosing yourself isn't selfish, that escaping abuse takes tremendous courage. This story isn't just about my wife's double life. It's about how we never fully know the people we love, how everyone carries secrets, some small, some life-altering, how trauma shapes people in ways that aren't always visible, how survival sometimes requires impossible choices, and how forgiveness isn't about excusing harm. It's about understanding context. Catherine didn't set out to lie to me. She set out to survive. And in surviving, she created a life that included me, our children, decades of memories and love. Was it built on lies about her past? Yes. Well, but were her feelings for me, her commitment to our family, were those lies? No, they were real. So I want to ask you, what would you have done? If you were in Catherine's position, trapped in an abusive marriage, fearing for your life, unable to take your child without putting them in danger, would you stay and risk dying? Or would you leave and live with the guilt? There's no right answer. And if you were in my position, if you discovered your spouse had been living under a false identity, would you stay or walk away? Again, no right answer, just choices. I chose to stay because I believe people are more than their worst mistakes. I believe trauma survivors deserve compassion. And I believe the woman I married, regardless of what name she was using, loved me truly. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, please know there is help available. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is 1-800-NIECE 7997-233. You don't have to disappear like Catherine did. There are better options now. You deserve to live without fear. You deserve to survive. Thank you for watching. Drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts. What would you have done? And if this story impacted you, please consider subscribing, because we all have secrets. We all have pain. And we all deserve the chance to be known fully and truly and loved anyway.